The morning mist hung thick over the mountains of Afghanistan as Team Alpha prepared for what seemed like another routine patrol. The 6 Navy SEALs had been stationed at Forward Operating Base Chapman for 3 months, conducting reconnaissance missions in the volatile Kunar province. Their mission briefings had become predictable: gather intelligence, avoid contact, return safely. But today felt different. Petty Officer Jake Morrison checked his rifle for the 3rd time, his weathered hands moving with practiced precision. At 28, he was the oldest member of the team and had earned the respect of his younger teammates through countless missions. His piercing blue eyes scanned the tree line beyond the base perimeter, searching for any sign of movement. Something in the air made his skin crawl, an instinct honed by years of combat experience. The team leader, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez, gathered his men around the tactical map spread across a wooden crate. His voice was steady and calm as he outlined their route through the narrow valley that locals called the Devil's Corridor. Intelligence reports suggested Taliban fighters had been using the area to transport weapons and supplies between villages. Their job was to observe and report, nothing more. Rodriguez pointed to several key positions on the map with his calloused finger. "We'll establish overwatch positions here and here," he said, tapping 2 elevated points. "Morrison, you'll take the north ridge with Peterson. Chen and Williams will cover the south approach. Thompson and I will maintain position in the center valley." The younger SEALs nodded silently, their faces painted with camouflage and determination. Each man carried approximately 60 pounds of gear, including ammunition, communication equipment, water, and medical supplies. They had trained for scenarios like this hundreds of times, but the reality of combat always brought unexpected challenges. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the team made final preparations for their departure. They synchronized their watches, tested their radio communications, and reviewed emergency extraction procedures. The helicopter that would drop them at the insertion point was already warming up on the landing pad, its rotors creating small dust storms across the base. Morrison felt the familiar pre-mission tension building in his chest. He had learned to embrace this feeling rather than fight it. The nervousness kept him sharp and alert. He thought briefly about his wife Sarah back home in Virginia Beach, probably getting their daughter ready for school at this very moment. These thoughts both motivated him and created a heavy weight in his stomach. The flight to the insertion point took 45 minutes, with the helicopter flying low to avoid detection by enemy forces. The landscape below looked deceptively peaceful, with scattered villages and terraced farmland carved into the mountainsides. But the SEALs knew that appearances could be deadly in this part of Afghanistan. Upon reaching the landing zone, the team quickly disembarked and established a security perimeter while the helicopter departed. The silence that followed was almost overwhelming after the constant noise of the aircraft. Each SEAL took a moment to adjust to their surroundings, listening for any sounds that might indicate enemy presence. Rodriguez used hand signals to direct his men toward their planned route. They moved in a tactical formation, maintaining proper spacing and covering all potential angles of attack. The terrain was challenging, with loose rocks and steep inclines that tested their physical conditioning. Every step required careful consideration to avoid creating noise that might compromise their position. After 2 hours of careful movement, the team reached their designated observation area. The valley spread out below them like a natural amphitheater, with several well-worn paths crisscrossing the terrain. Local farmers occasionally used these routes to move between villages, but intelligence suggested that insurgent forces had been exploiting the same pathways. Morrison and Peterson took up their position on the north ridge, using natural rock formations to create concealed observation posts. Through their high-powered scopes, they could see for miles in every direction. The view was both beautiful and intimidating, reminding them how isolated they were from any potential support. The first few hours passed without incident. They observed local civilians going about their daily routines, including shepherds moving small flocks of goats and women carrying water containers. These normal activities helped mask any potential insurgent movement, making the SEALs' job more challenging. As afternoon approached, Peterson noticed movement along one of the main trails. A group of approximately 12 men was moving through the valley, carrying what appeared to be weapons and heavy backpacks. Their movement patterns and equipment clearly identified them as combatants rather than civilians. Morrison immediately radioed their observations to Rodriguez, providing detailed descriptions of the enemy force's size, equipment, and direction of travel. The team leader acknowledged the report and instructed all positions to maintain surveillance while he coordinated with command for further instructions. The tension level increased significantly as the SEALs realized they were observing a significant enemy movement. Their rules of engagement were clear. They were authorized to defend themselves if attacked, but their primary mission remained observation and intelligence gathering. However, the situation could change rapidly if they were discovered. Through their scopes, the SEALs watched as the insurgent group stopped to rest near a small stream. The enemy fighters appeared confident and relaxed, suggesting they believed the area was secure. Some removed their weapons and equipment to drink water and eat food, while others maintained security positions around the group. Morrison studied each individual through his scope, noting their weapons, equipment, and behavior patterns. This information would be valuable for future operations against the same group. He sketched quick notes in his waterproof notebook, documenting everything he observed. As the sun began to sink toward the western mountains, the insurgent group resumed their movement toward the village at the far end of the valley. The SEALs continued their surveillance, tracking the enemy's progress and reporting regular updates to their command structure. The peaceful afternoon was about to take a dramatic turn that would test every aspect of their training and experience. None of them realized that hidden eyes were already watching their positions, calculating distances and planning an attack that would change everything in a matter of seconds. The sun was beginning its descent behind the jagged peaks when Morrison first noticed something was wrong. The normal sounds of the valley had gradually diminished throughout the afternoon. Birds that had been calling from the scattered trees had gone silent. Even the insects seemed to have disappeared. This unnatural quiet sent alarm bells ringing in his experienced mind. Peterson lay motionless beside him, his eye pressed against his rifle scope as he continued monitoring the insurgent group below. The enemy fighters had reached the village outskirts and were setting up what appeared to be a temporary camp. Their relaxed posture suggested they felt completely safe in this remote location. Morrison keyed his radio quietly, speaking barely above a whisper. "Alpha 1, this is Overwatch North. Something's not right up here. The environment's gone completely silent." His voice carried the tension that was building in his gut. Rodriguez's voice crackled back through the earpiece. "Copy that, North. We're seeing the same thing down here. Maintain positions and stay alert. Could be nothing, but trust your instincts." The team leader was experiencing his own growing sense of unease. After 15 years in special operations, he had learned to trust the subtle signs that indicated danger. The way shadows seemed to move differently, how the wind carried unfamiliar scents, and most importantly, the behavior of local wildlife. When nature went quiet in Afghanistan, it usually meant predators were nearby. Chen and Williams were positioned on the south ridge, approximately 800 meters from Morrison's location. Through their own observation equipment, they had been tracking a different group of local civilians who appeared to be following normal daily routines. However, even these people had mysteriously vanished from sight within the last 30 minutes. Williams adjusted his position slightly, trying to get a better view of a suspicious area where he thought he had detected movement. The 24-year-old SEAL from Texas had exceptional eyesight and often spotted things his teammates missed. Today, his natural abilities were making him increasingly uncomfortable. "South position to Alpha 1, Williams whispered into his radio. "I've got possible movement in the tree line approximately 400 meters northeast of our position. Can't get positive identification, but something's definitely out there." Rodriguez felt his pulse quicken as he processed the reports from both observation teams. Their training had prepared them for exactly this type of situation, but the reality was always more intense than any simulation. He made a quick decision based on his experience and the growing evidence that they were being watched. "All positions, this is Alpha 1. We're going to execute tactical withdrawal procedures. North team, you move first. Bound back to checkpoint Charlie and establish overwatch. South team will follow in 5 minutes. Thompson and I will maintain current position until both teams are secured." Morrison acknowledged the order and began preparing for movement. He and Peterson gathered their equipment quickly but methodically, ensuring nothing was left behind that could identify them or their mission. Every piece of gear was accounted for and secured to prevent noise during their withdrawal. As Morrison prepared to move, he took one final look through his scope at the valley below. The insurgent group was still visible near the village, but something else caught his attention. A reflection of sunlight off what appeared to be glass or metal from a position approximately 600 meters to his east. The brief flash lasted only a second, but it was enough to confirm his worst suspicions. "Peterson, we've got company," Morrison whispered urgently. "There's someone with optics watching us from the eastern ridgeline. We need to move now." Peterson immediately shifted his focus to the area Morrison had indicated. Through his scope, he could make out what appeared to be a camouflaged position among the rocks and vegetation. The concealment was expert level, suggesting they were dealing with experienced fighters rather than untrained insurgents. Alpha 1, North Team has positive identification of enemy observation post on Eastern Ridge. We are definitely being watched. Request immediate extraction, Morrison reported while beginning to move toward their planned withdrawal route. Rodriguez felt his blood turn cold as he realized the implications of Morrison's report. If the enemy had established observation posts overlooking their positions, it meant they had been under surveillance for an unknown period. Worse, it suggested this was a planned ambush rather than a chance encounter. All positions, abort current withdrawal plan, were potentially surrounded. Switch to emergency extraction procedures. Move to alternate rally point Bravo. North Team, suppress that observation post if you can get a clean shot. Morrison and Peterson began moving as quickly as possible while maintaining tactical awareness. The terrain was challenging, with loose rocks and limited cover. Every step had to be calculated to avoid creating noise or exposing themselves to potential enemy fire. As they bounded between cover positions, Peterson suddenly spotted additional movement in the tree line below their position. At least 3 armed figures were moving through the vegetation, attempting to establish blocking positions along their planned escape route. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. "Multiple enemy fighters moving to block our withdrawal route," Peterson reported breathlessly as they continued their tactical movement. "Count at least 3, possibly more." Rodriguez was now coordinating multiple emergency procedures simultaneously. He contacted their command post to request immediate air support and emergency extraction. At the same time, he was directing his team's movement and trying to assess the full scope of the enemy force they were facing. The team leader realized they had walked into a carefully planned trap. The insurgent group they had been observing was likely bait, designed to keep the SEALs focused while other enemy fighters moved into position around them. It was a sophisticated tactic that demonstrated their opponents were well-trained and experienced. Thompson, the team's communications specialist, was working frantically to establish contact with available air assets. The nearest Apache helicopter was approximately 20 minutes away, which felt like an eternity under their current circumstances. Close air support would be critical for breaking out of the developing encirclement. As Morrison and Peterson continued their movement toward the rally point, they could hear the sound of voices echoing from the valley below. The enemy fighters were no longer attempting to maintain stealth, suggesting they felt confident in their tactical advantage. This was both encouraging and terrifying for the surrounded SEALs. Williams and Chen were experiencing their own challenges as they attempted to reach the rally point from the south ridge. They had identified at least 2 enemy positions that would have clear fields of fire along their planned route. The situation required immediate adaptation of their escape plan. "South Team to Alpha 1, our route is compromised. We're going to have to take the long way around through the creek bed. We'll add at least 10 minutes to our movement time," Rodriguez acknowledged while fighting to maintain calm in his voice. Every additional minute increased the risk of the enemy completing their encirclement. Time was now their most precious commodity, and it was rapidly running out. The first shot shattered the tense silence like thunder in the mountains. Morrison felt the bullet crack past his head, close enough that he could feel the displaced air against his cheek. The distinctive sound of an AK-47 echoed across the valley, immediately followed by the sharp report of a sniper rifle from a completely different direction. "Contact! Contact! We're taking effective fire from multiple positions," Morrison shouted into his radio while diving behind a large boulder. Peterson rolled into position beside him, both men scanning for muzzle flashes that would reveal their attackers' locations. The enemy had initiated their ambush with precision timing. Just as the SEALs were most vulnerable during their withdrawal movement, multiple firing positions opened up simultaneously. The sound of automatic weapons fire created a deadly symphony that reverberated off the mountain walls. Rodriguez's training kicked in immediately as he processed the chaos erupting around his team. All positions, report status and locations. North team, where's that fire coming from? Morrison pressed himself against the rock as more bullets impacted nearby, sending chips of stone flying through the air. Through the noise and confusion, he was trying to identify the source of the sniper fire that seemed most dangerous. The precision of that first shot indicated they were dealing with a skilled marksman. North team taking fire from at least 3 positions. We've got automatic weapons from the tree line below and sniper fire from an elevated position to our east. Cannot get positive identification on the sniper location, Morrison reported while returning fire toward the muzzle flashes he could see. Peterson had his rifle trained on the eastern ridgeline where they had spotted the observation post earlier. Through his scope, he was searching for any sign of the sniper who had nearly taken Morrison's head off. The enemy shooter was well concealed and had chosen his position expertly. Williams and Chen were experiencing their own nightmare on the south ridge. Enemy fighters had appeared from concealed positions along their withdrawal route, forcing them to take cover in a shallow depression that offered minimal protection. Bullets were striking all around their position, kicking up dirt and rock fragments. South team is pinned down. We've got at least 4 fighters with automatic weapons blocking our movement to the rally point. Request immediate support. Williams called out while firing controlled bursts at the enemy positions. Chen was working to identify specific target locations while conserving ammunition. Their situation was becoming increasingly desperate as the enemy fighters were attempting to maneuver closer to their position. The young SEAL from California was using every bit of his training to maintain composure under the intense fire. Rodriguez and Thompson were in the center valley, trying to coordinate their team's response while dealing with their own incoming fire. The team leader was simultaneously calling for air support, directing his men's movements and engaging enemy targets. The weight of command felt crushing in these moments. Apache 1-7, this is Alpha Team. We are in contact with approximately 12 to 15 enemy fighters. Coordinates follow. Request immediate close air support. Danger close authorization approved. Rodriguez spoke rapidly into his radio while changing position to avoid incoming fire. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled back through the static. Alpha Team Apache 1-7 inbound your location. ETA 12 minutes. Understand danger close authorization. Marking your position with infrared strobes. 12 minutes felt like 12 hours under the current circumstances. The SEALs would have to survive the ambush using only their training, skill, and the limited ammunition they carried. Every shot had to count, and every movement had to be calculated to avoid the increasingly accurate enemy fire. Morrison spotted movement in the tree line below and squeezed off 2 quick shots. His target dropped behind cover, but he couldn't tell if he had scored a hit. The enemy fighters were using the terrain expertly, appearing just long enough to fire before disappearing back into concealment. Peterson suddenly stiffened as he identified the sniper's position through his scope. I've got eyes on the sniper. Eastern ridge, approximately 700 meters. He's in a camouflaged hide behind that cluster of large rocks. Morrison shifted his attention to Peterson's target area. Through his own scope, he could barely make out what appeared to be the outline of a rifle barrel protruding from between the rocks. The enemy sniper had constructed an excellent firing position that provided both concealment and protection. Can you take the shot? Morrison asked while continuing to monitor other enemy positions. Peterson studied the target through his scope, calculating distance, wind conditions, and the probability of a successful hit. The range was at the edge of his effective shooting distance, and the target was only partially exposed. It would be a challenging shot under the best conditions, and their current situation was far from ideal. It's a difficult shot, but I think I can make it. Give me covering fire when I take the shot in case I miss, Peterson replied while adjusting his scope and settling into a stable shooting position. Williams and Chen were fighting for their lives as enemy fighters attempted to flank their position. The 2 SEALs were moving between available cover, trying to prevent the enemy from gaining a tactical advantage. Their ammunition supply was becoming a serious concern as the firefight continued. We need to break contact and move to secondary positions, Chen shouted over the noise of gunfire. We can't stay here much longer without being overrun. Williams agreed but realized their options were extremely limited. The enemy had positioned themselves to control most available escape routes. Any movement would expose them to fire from multiple directions. They were trapped in a deadly game of cat and mouse. Rodriguez was coordinating fire and movement for his entire team while engaging targets himself. The team leader's experience was being tested to its limits as he tried to maintain tactical control of a rapidly deteriorating situation. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death for his men. Thompson had established communication with multiple air assets that were responding to their emergency call. In addition to the Apache helicopter, a pair of F-16 fighter jets were being scrambled from Bagram Air Base. However, the fast-moving jets would take longer to reach their location. Alpha Team, be advised we have additional air support inbound. Call sign Viper Flight 2 F-16s ETA 25 minutes. They'll be carrying mixed ordnance for close air support, Thompson reported to Rodriguez between bursts of return fire. The knowledge that additional help was coming provided some psychological comfort, but the immediate threat remained overwhelming. The SEALs had to survive the next 20 minutes using only their current resources and tactical skills. Peterson had been tracking the enemy sniper for several minutes, waiting for the perfect opportunity to take his shot. The target had been firing periodically, but always from slightly different positions within his concealed hide. The enemy marksman was skilled and experienced. Taking the shot now, Peterson whispered as he controlled his breathing and squeezed the trigger slowly. The rifle bucked against his shoulder as the bullet traveled across the valley toward its target. Through his scope, Peterson watched as his bullet struck the rocks near the sniper's position, sending up a small cloud of dust and debris. The enemy marksman immediately shifted deeper into cover, but Peterson couldn't tell if he had been hit or was simply reacting to the near miss. The gunfire suddenly stopped. The abrupt silence was more terrifying than the chaos of battle had been. Morrison and Peterson exchanged worried glances from behind their boulder, both men straining to hear any sound that might indicate what the enemy was planning next. The sudden ceasefire could mean anything from a tactical withdrawal to preparation for a coordinated assault. Rodriguez's voice cut through the silence with quiet urgency. All positions report status. Why did they stop firing? Williams responded first from the South Ridge, his voice tense with concern. South team still in position. No visual on enemy fighters. They just melted back into the tree line about 30 seconds ago. Morrison scanned the valley below through his scope, searching for any sign of movement among the rocks and vegetation where the enemy had been firing from moments before. The insurgents had vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving no trace of their presence except for the echo of gunfire still ringing in his ears. North Team has no visual contact with enemy forces. The tree line where they were shooting from appears empty, Morrison reported while keeping his rifle trained on the most likely approach routes. Peterson was still focused on the eastern ridge where he had engaged the sniper. Through his scope, he could see the rocky outcropping where his target had been positioned, but there was no sign of movement or life. His shot had either eliminated the threat or forced the enemy marksman to relocate to a different position. Rodriguez was analyzing the tactical situation rapidly. In his experience, enemy forces didn't simply break contact during a successful ambush unless they had a specific reason. Either they were repositioning for a better attack, they had accomplished their mission, or something had spooked them into withdrawing. Thompson was monitoring multiple radio frequencies, listening for any intelligence that might explain the sudden change in enemy behavior. Through his headset, he could hear chatter from other coalition forces operating in the region, but nothing that seemed directly related to their current situation. Alpha Team, this is Apache 17. We're 8 minutes out from your position. We're monitoring your frequency and heard the contact reports. What's your current status? The helicopter pilot's voice provided a welcome reminder that help was still coming. Rodriguez keyed his radio to respond. Apache 17. Contact has ceased approximately 2 minutes ago. Unknown enemy strength withdrew from multiple positions around our location. We're maintaining defensive positions pending your arrival. The team leader was troubled by the enemy's sudden withdrawal. Experienced insurgent fighters didn't usually break off an attack when they held tactical advantage, unless they had intelligence about incoming air support. This suggested their opponents were well informed about coalition capabilities and response times. Morrison was studying the terrain around their position with renewed attention. If the enemy had withdrawn temporarily, they might be planning to attack from a different direction or wait for the air support to leave before resuming their assault. The SEALs needed to be prepared for any possibility. Movement in the eastern tree line, Peterson reported quietly. Something's moving through the vegetation about 400 meters from our position. Can't get positive identification, but it's definitely not an animal. All team members immediately focused their attention on Peterson's reported location. Through their various optics, they began searching for any sign of the movement he had detected. The ability to spot threats before being spotted often meant the difference between survival and death. Williams and Chen were using their tactical binoculars to scan the areas around their position that had been occupied by enemy fighters minutes earlier. The sudden silence was making both men increasingly nervous. In their experience, quiet moments during combat often preceded the most dangerous phases of an engagement. "I don't like this," Chen whispered to Williams. "They had us pinned down pretty good. Why would they just disappear unless they're planning something worse?" Williams nodded in agreement while continuing to monitor potential threat locations. The young Texan had noticed that the local bird calls, which had been absent during the firefight, were slowly beginning to return. This could indicate that the immediate threat had passed, or it could be a sign that the enemy was moving away from their immediate area. Rodriguez was considering their options for the next phase of the mission. With air support inbound and the immediate threat apparently diminished, they needed to decide whether to continue with their original mission or extract immediately. The decision would depend partly on the pilot's assessment of the tactical situation. Thompson had been monitoring enemy radio communications using specialized equipment that could intercept insurgent frequencies. Through his headset, he was hearing increased chatter on known Taliban channels, suggesting that word of the contact was spreading among enemy forces in the region. Alpha 1, I'm picking up increased enemy communications. Sounds like they're reporting our position to other units in the area. We might have more company heading our way, Thompson reported while adjusting his equipment to get clearer reception. This intelligence changed Rodriguez's tactical assessment significantly. If additional enemy forces were moving toward their location, the brief lull in fighting might be the calm before a much larger storm. The team needed to prepare for the possibility of facing a significantly larger enemy force. Morrison spotted something that made his blood run cold. Through his scope, he could see what appeared to be the muzzle of a rifle protruding from vegetation approximately 600 meters to their north. The weapon was pointed directly at their position, suggesting that at least one enemy fighter had maintained overwatch of their location. Possible sniper position, North Ridge, 600 meters. I can see what looks like a rifle barrel but no movement, Morrison reported while adjusting his scope for a clearer view. Peterson immediately shifted his attention to Morrison's target area. Through his own optic, he could confirm the presence of what appeared to be a camouflaged firing position. However, he couldn't determine whether the position was currently occupied or had been abandoned. The sound of approaching helicopter rotors began to echo off the mountain walls, growing steadily louder as Apache 17 closed the distance to their location. The distinctive whop-whop-whop of the aircraft's main rotor was the most beautiful sound the surrounded SEALs had heard all day. Rodriguez prepared to guide the helicopter to their location using infrared markers that would be visible to the pilot's night vision equipment. The arrival of air support would dramatically change the tactical balance, but it also meant the enemy might resume their attack in an attempt to inflict casualties before the helicopter could effectively intervene. Williams and Chen were preparing to mark their position for the helicopter crew when Chen noticed something that made him freeze. Through his binoculars, he could see what appeared to be a lone figure moving through the tree line, approximately 800 meters from their location. The individual was moving with the fluid grace of someone extremely comfortable in the terrain. Single individual moving through eastern tree line, approximately 800 meters from our position. Movement pattern suggests advanced training. Could be the sniper we've been looking for, Chen reported while keeping his binoculars focused on the moving figure. Morrison and Peterson immediately shifted their attention to Chen's reported location. Through their scopes, they could barely make out the figure moving between trees and rocky outcroppings. The individual was using terrain and vegetation for concealment with expert skill. I've got visual on the target, Peterson confirmed. Definitely appears to be armed and moving with purpose. This could be our sniper trying to reposition for a better shot. The approaching helicopter was now clearly visible as it crested the ridge to the west of their position. Apache 17 was a fearsome sight, bristling with weapon systems and advanced targeting equipment. The arrival of the aircraft would provide the SEALs with significant firepower and reconnaissance capabilities. Rodriguez was about to radio the helicopter crew when something unexpected happened that would change everything. They thought they knew about their situation. The shot that rang out across the valley didn't come from any of the enemy positions the SEALs had been monitoring. Instead, it originated from deep within the forest to their southwest, a location they hadn't even considered as a potential threat. The sound was different too, not the familiar crack of an AK-47, but the deep, authoritative boom of a high-powered precision rifle. Morrison's head snapped toward the sound, his combat instinct screaming that something fundamental had just changed about their tactical situation. Through his scope, he searched frantically for the source of the shot while simultaneously trying to determine what the target had been. Peterson was scanning the eastern ridgeline where they had been tracking the lone figure when he saw something that made him question everything they thought they knew about the engagement. The figure that had been moving through the tree line had suddenly dropped to the ground and wasn't moving. Target down. The individual we were tracking just went down. Single shot appears to be a headshot from the trajectory, Peterson reported with confusion evident in his voice. Rodriguez felt his tactical understanding of the situation spinning out of control. Who had fired that shot? None of his men had engaged the target, and it certainly hadn't come from any of the enemy positions they had identified. The precision and timing suggested an unknown shooter with exceptional skill. Williams and Chen were experiencing their own moment of bewilderment as they tried to process what had just happened. Through their observation equipment, they had watched the mysterious figure collapse after the shot, but they couldn't identify where the killing shot had originated from. Alpha 1, this is South Team. We've got visual confirmation of one enemy KIA, but we have no idea who fired the shot. The shot came from outside our area of operations, Williams reported while continuing to scan for additional threats. Thompson was monitoring multiple radio frequencies, searching for any communication that might explain the mysterious shooter. Coalition forces were required to report all weapons discharges, but he wasn't hearing any reports of friendly forces engaging targets in their area. Apache 17 was now directly overhead, the crew scanning the terrain below with thermal imaging and optical sensors. The pilot's voice crackled through the radio with professional calm, despite the confusing tactical picture. Alpha Team, Apache 17 has you in sight. We're detecting multiple heat signatures in the valley, but we're having difficulty distinguishing between friendly and hostile forces. Can you clarify the tactical situation? Rodriguez keyed his radio while continuing to watch for any sign of the mysterious shooter. Apache 17, we've had contact with approximately 12 to 15 hostile forces. Contact broke approximately 10 minutes ago. Unknown shooter just eliminated one hostile target from an unidentified position. We cannot account for all players in this engagement. The helicopter crew was processing this information while conducting their own tactical assessment of the area. Through their advanced sensors, they could detect heat signatures and movement patterns that weren't visible to the ground forces. What they were seeing was puzzling. Morrison was studying the forest area where the shot had originated, but the terrain and vegetation made it impossible to spot the shooter's position. Whoever had fired was either extremely well concealed or had immediately changed position after taking the shot. Movement in the valley, Chen reported suddenly. Multiple figures emerging from concealed positions. Looks like our original contact group is withdrawing rapidly to the south. Through their various optics, the SEALs watched as the insurgent fighters who had ambushed them began emerging from their hiding spots and moving quickly away from the area. Their movement pattern suggested they were retreating rather than repositioning for another attack. Peterson was tracking the enemy withdrawal through his scope when he noticed something that added another layer of mystery to the situation. The insurgents were moving with what appeared to be panic, rather than the disciplined withdrawal he would expect from experienced fighters. These guys are running scared, Peterson observed. Whatever happened with that shot has them spooked. They're not conducting a tactical withdrawal. They're fleeing. Williams was watching the same group through his binoculars and came to the same conclusion. The enemy fighters were abandoning equipment and moving as fast as the terrain would allow. Something had clearly terrified them into abandoning their successful ambush. Rodriguez was trying to piece together the tactical puzzle while maintaining security for his team. The sudden appearance of an unknown shooter who had eliminated an enemy target and apparently scared off the remaining insurgents raised serious questions about Who else was operating in their area of operations? Apache 17 was tracking the fleeing insurgents through thermal imaging while maintaining overwatch of the SEAL team's position. The helicopter crew was reporting their observations to higher command while requesting guidance on how to handle the complex tactical situation. Alpha Team, we have visual on approximately 10 individuals moving rapidly south from your location. Thermal signatures suggest they're carrying weapons and equipment. Do you want us to engage? The pilot asked while keeping his weapon systems trained on the retreating enemy forces. Rodriguez considered the rules of engagement carefully. The insurgents were clearly enemy combatants who had attacked his team, but they were now withdrawing from the area. More importantly, there was still an unidentified shooter somewhere in the vicinity whose intentions remained unknown. Negative on engagement. Apache 17. Let them go for now. We need to determine who else is operating in this area before we start shooting, Rodriguez decided while continuing to monitor the mysterious forest location. Thompson was expanding his monitoring efforts to include coalition special operations frequencies, wondering if there might be another team operating in the area without their knowledge. Sometimes multiple units ended up in the same location due to communication failures or operational overlap. Morrison was becoming increasingly concerned about the unknown shooter's identity and intentions. In his experience, there were very few people capable of making the shot they had just witnessed, and most of them worked for the U.S. military or Allied Special Operations Forces. Chief, we need to consider the possibility that we've got friendlies out there, Morrison said quietly into his radio. That shot was too good and too timely to be accidental. Someone was watching this whole engagement. Peterson agreed with Morrison's assessment while continuing to scan for any sign of the mysterious marksman. The precision of the shot and the timing suggested someone with advanced training and possibly intelligence about their mission that they weren't aware of. Chen and Williams were discussing the same possibility. From their position on the South Ridge, the sudden appearance of a skilled sniper who eliminated an enemy target and scared off the remaining insurgents felt too convenient to be coincidental. Rodriguez was reaching the same conclusion as his men, but it raised disturbing questions about operational security and command structure. If there was another friendly unit operating in their area, why hadn't they been briefed about it? Who had authorized a parallel operation? Apache 17 was continuing to monitor the area while the crew tried to spot any sign of the unknown shooter. Despite their advanced sensors and multiple observation angles, they couldn't identify any heat signatures or movement patterns that might reveal the marksman's location. The mystery deepened when Thompson intercepted a brief radio transmission on an encrypted frequency he didn't recognize. The message was short and consisted of only a few words, but it suggested that someone was monitoring their situation and had just reported the successful completion of some kind of mission. As the SEALs maintained their defensive positions and tried to process the confusing tactical situation, another development added to their growing concern. The radio intercept that Thompson had captured was being analyzed by intelligence specialists at their forward operating base, and the preliminary results were troubling. Alpha 1, this is Base Command. We're showing no friendly units authorized to operate in your area. Repeat, no friendly forces are supposed to be in your vicinity. Can you confirm the source of that precision shot? Rodriguez felt a chill run down his spine as he processed the command's message. If there were no authorized friendly forces in the area, then who had fired the shot that saved their lives? The alternatives were limited and none of them were particularly comforting. Morrison was reaching his own disturbing conclusion about their mysterious benefactor. The level of skill required for the shot they had witnessed, combined with the apparent intelligence about their mission and location, suggested someone with access to classified information and advanced training. Chief, I think we need to get out of here. Fast, Morrison said quietly. Whoever took that shot knows more about our operation than we do. That's not a comfortable position to be in. The sound of movement in the forest was barely audible, but Peterson's trained ears caught it immediately. Someone or something was moving through the vegetation with extraordinary stealth, approaching their general location from the southwest where the mysterious shot had originated. Apache 17 was conducting systematic sweeps of the area with thermal imaging, but the dense forest canopy was making it difficult to penetrate to ground level. The helicopter crew was frustrated by their inability to identify the source of the precision shot that had changed the entire engagement. Williams and Chen were preparing to move from their current position when Chen spotted something that made him freeze in place. Through his binoculars, he could see what appeared to be a lone figure moving through the tree line with fluid, almost ghostly movements. Single individual approaching from the southwest, approximately 400 meters and closing. Movement is extremely stealthy, suggests advanced training, Chen reported while keeping his optics focused on the approaching figure. Rodriguez was faced with a command decision that could determine whether his team lived or died. They could attempt to engage the approaching individual, try to escape the area immediately, or wait to see what the unknown person intended. Each option carried significant risks. Peterson had his rifle trained on the general area where Chen had spotted the movement, but the terrain and vegetation made it impossible to get a clear shot. The approaching figure was using every available piece of cover with expert skill. I can't get a clear sight picture. Whoever this is knows exactly how to use the terrain, Peterson reported while tracking the movement through his scope. Thompson was monitoring all available frequencies while preparing emergency extraction procedures. If the situation deteriorated further, they would need immediate helicopter extraction under potentially hostile fire. The complexity was growing by the minute. Morrison was studying the approaching figure through his own optics, when something about the movement pattern struck him as familiar. The way the individual used cover and concealment, the rhythm of movement between positions reminded him of someone he had trained with years earlier. Apache 17 was repositioning to get a better angle on the approaching individual, when the pilot reported something that added another layer to the mystery. Through thermal imaging, they could confirm that the person was carrying what appeared to be a high-powered rifle and advanced optical equipment. Alpha Team, we have confirmation that your approaching individual is armed with precision rifle and appears to have military-grade equipment. Recommend extreme caution in your engagement decision, the pilot reported while maintaining overwatch position. Rodriguez was weighing his options when the decision was made for him. The approaching figure stopped moving and raised what appeared to be a white cloth attached to a stick, the universal signal for a desire to communicate under a temporary truce. He's signaling for parley, Williams observed through his binoculars. White flag, standard military protocol. Whoever this is wants to talk. Morrison felt his pulse quicken as he studied the distant figure through his scope. There was something about the person's posture and equipment that was triggering memories from his past, but he couldn't quite place the connection. Rodriguez made his decision based on tactical necessity and curiosity about their mysterious benefactor. All positions, weapons ready, but do not engage unless fired upon. Let's see what this individual wants to communicate. The figure in the forest began moving again, but this time the approach was open and deliberate rather than stealthy. Whoever it was wanted to be seen clearly as they closed the distance to the SEAL team's position. Peterson was tracking the approaching individual through his scope when details became clear enough to make a positive identification. What he saw through the magnified optic made him question everything he thought he knew about their current situation. The figure that emerged from the forest was not what any of the SEALs had expected. It was a woman, approximately 30 years old, moving with the confident precision of someone who had spent years perfecting the art of combat. She wore civilian hiking clothes that had been carefully modified with military-grade equipment, and she carried a rifle that Morrison immediately recognized as a custom-built precision weapon worth more than most people's. Peterson's voice was barely a whisper as he reported what he was seeing through his scope. It's a female, early 30s, carrying what appears to be a .338 Lapua Magnum with custom modifications. She's moving like she owns this mountain. Rodriguez felt his understanding of the tactical situation shift once again as he processed Peterson's description. A lone female sniper operating independently in one of the most dangerous regions of Afghanistan was almost unprecedented. The questions about her identity and purpose multiplied exponentially. Morrison was studying the approaching woman through his own optics when recognition hit him like a physical blow. The way she moved, the equipment she carried, even her general appearance triggered memories that he had tried to bury for years. It couldn't be possible, but the evidence was undeniable. "Chief, I think I know who that is," Morrison said quietly, his voice carrying a mixture of amazement and concern that surprised his teammates. "If I'm right, we're looking at someone who's supposed to be dead." The woman continued her approach, maintaining the white flag while staying in clear view of the SEAL team's positions. When she reached a distance of approximately 200 meters, She stopped and raised her free hand in what appeared to be a specific military signal. Rodriguez was trying to process Morrison's cryptic comment when the woman's signal became clear. She was using hand signals from advanced sniper training protocols that were taught only to the most elite marksmen in the U.S. military. The signals were asking for permission to approach for a face-to-face meeting. Apache 17 was maintaining overwatch, while the crew tried to understand the developing situation. The helicopter pilot was requesting guidance from command about how to handle the unprecedented circumstances they were witnessing. Alpha Team, be advised that command has no records of any female operators authorized for your area of operations. Recommend extreme caution in any interactions with this individual, the pilot reported while keeping his weapon systems. Reddy Williams and Chen were watching the scene unfold from their position on the South Ridge, both men fascinated by the mysterious woman who had potentially saved their lives. The precision shot that had eliminated the enemy sniper and scattered the insurgent forces was clearly beyond the capabilities of most military marksmen. Morrison was struggling with the implications of what he thought he was seeing. If his identification was correct, they were looking at someone who had officially died in a classified operation 3 years earlier. The ramifications of her apparent survival would shake the foundations of several military organizations. "Chief, I need to talk to her," Morrison said with urgency in his voice. "If she's who I think she is, then we're dealing with something much bigger than a random encounter. This could be connected to operations we're not supposed to know about." Rodriguez was weighing the risks and benefits of allowing direct contact when the woman made the decision for him. She carefully placed her rifle on the ground, raised both hands clearly above her head, and began walking directly toward their position. Peterson kept his scope trained on the approaching figure while scanning the surrounding area for any sign of additional threats. The woman's willingness to abandon her weapon and expose herself suggested either complete confidence in their peaceful intentions or desperation born of immediate necessity. Thompson was monitoring multiple frequencies while documenting everything that was happening for his after-action report. The complexity of the situation was beyond anything covered in their training, and he wanted to ensure that every detail was preserved for intelligence analysis. As the woman drew closer, more details became visible to the SEAL team. She was clearly experienced in mountain warfare, with equipment that had been carefully selected and maintained. Scars on her exposed arm suggested someone who had seen significant combat action. Rodriguez made his decision based on tactical curiosity and the apparent reduction in immediate threat. "Morrison, you and Peterson provide security while I make contact. Everyone else maintain overwatch positions and be ready for anything." Morrison felt his heart rate increase as Rodriguez prepared to meet with the mysterious woman. If his identification was correct, the next few minutes would answer questions that had haunted intelligence agencies for years while potentially creating new problems that no one was prepared to handle. The woman stopped approximately 50 meters from Rodriguez's position and waited for him to approach. Her posture was relaxed but alert, suggesting someone comfortable with high-stress situations. When she spoke, her voice carried a slight accent that Morrison couldn't immediately place. "Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, Team Alpha, currently on reconnaissance mission in Kunar Province," she said with obvious knowledge of their operation. "My name is Elena Vasquez, formerly Staff Sergeant, United States Army Special Operations Command. Officially, I died in a helicopter crash in 2022. Rodriguez felt the pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to fall into place as he processed the woman's introduction. Her knowledge of their mission details and her claimed military background suggested connections to intelligence operations that operated outside normal command structures. Morrison was listening to the conversation through his radio earpiece, and Elena's voice confirmed his worst fears. She was indeed the person he had thought she was, but her survival raised questions about events that were supposed to have been permanently classified. "Sergeant Vasquez, you're supposed to be KIA. What are you doing in Afghanistan and how did you know about our mission?" Rodriguez asked while maintaining a safe distance and keeping his weapon ready. Elena smiled with what appeared to be genuine amusement at the question. "Chief, I've been operating in this region for 18 months, conducting missions that officially don't exist for organizations that officially don't exist. Your team stumbled into an operation that's been 3 years in the planning." Thompson was frantically trying to process the intelligence implications of Elena's revelation while monitoring radio traffic for any indication that higher command was aware of the developing situation. The existence of parallel operations suggested intelligence compartmentalization at levels beyond his security clearance. Apache 17 was maintaining position while the crew listened to the conversation below. The pilot was reporting the developing situation to higher command while requesting guidance on how to handle what appeared to be a significant intelligence breach. Peterson was providing security overwatch when he noticed movement in the tree line behind Elena's previous position. Through his scope, he could see what appeared to be additional equipment and supplies, suggesting that the lone woman had been operating from a well-established base in the area. Elena continued her explanation while Rodriguez tried to process the implications. The insurgent group you were observing today included a high-value target that my organization has been tracking for 2 years. Your presence forced us to accelerate our timeline, but it also provided the perfect cover for the elimination. Morrison realized that their entire mission had been manipulated from the beginning. The intelligence that had led them to this location, the timing of their insertion, even the insurgent activity they had been sent to observe, all of it could have been orchestrated to provide cover for Elena's operation. Williams and Chen were listening to the conversation while maintaining their security positions, both men amazed by the complexity of the situation they had stumbled into. The revelation that their mission had been used as cover for a parallel operation raised serious questions about operational security and command authority. Rodriguez was faced with a decision that would impact his team's future and potentially expose classified operations that extended far beyond his authority level. Elena's presence and knowledge suggested connections to intelligence organizations that operated outside normal military channels. Elena seemed to understand Rodriguez's dilemma as she prepared to provide information that would change everything the SEAL team thought they knew about their mission and the war they were fighting in Afghanistan. The truth was more complex and dangerous than any of them had imagined.